Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We will be getting started momentarily. Good afternoon and welcome to today's session, Becoming an AmeriCorps VISTA Project Sponsor. My name is Roxy and I'd like to welcome you from the Get It Back campaign. For those of you who aren't familiar, I'll share a little bit of background first about the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and the Get It Back campaign. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and policy institute. We pursue federal and state policies designed to reduce poverty and inequality in equitable and effective ways. For more than 30 years, the center has spearheaded a national tax credit outreach campaign, which is currently known as the Get It Back campaign. This is a national effort to connect eligible people to tax benefits, such as the Earned Income Tax Credit, the Child Tax Credit, free tax preparation, and other tax benefits. We work with a diverse network of partners, and you can learn more, including checking out our resources at taxoutreach.org. So as we get started, we'd love to learn a little bit about who is in this space and sharing this virtual room with us. Please put your name, or you can share your organization's name and your location in the chat. As you're doing that, I will go ahead and introduce our presenter for today. We are so excited to have Meg Ansara with us, who is the director of the AmeriCorps VISTA program. Meg brings with her to AmeriCorps VISTA a passion to ensure everyone has the opportunity to succeed in life. Growing up in a family of organizers and teachers, she has served as an advisor to several foundations, advocacy and direct service organizations, and is committed to improving education. A fun fact about Meg is that Meg was a forest firefighter and named to one of Oregon's elite hotshot teams. So welcome, Meg. We're so happy to have you, and I will turn it over to you. First, just thank you, everyone, for sharing where you are tuning in from. It's great to see that we have people from across the country. So, Meg, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Roxy. And thank you so much for everyone for being on this call today. I'm just scrolling and just seeing all the different states and incredible organizations that are coming in. And before I even get started on AmeriCorps VISTA, I just want to say thank you for coming and thank you for your tremendous work. As Roxy explained, I did start my career as a wildland firefighter, and there's lots that is relevant, I would argue, to tax work and community capacity building. So thank you for fighting these fires and doing the incredible work that you do. I am so thrilled to have this chance to talk to such a powerful group of organizations about AmeriCorps VISTA. And so what I want to do in this presentation is just go through kind of the basics on AmeriCorps VISTA, what it really looks like, how it works, and also kind of what the application process looks like, so that you and people that you know can evaluate whether or not it's an opportunity that you are interested in pursuing. We'll also explain kind of very clear next steps. And I also want to talk about what it looks like for AmeriCorps VISTA to work in kind of the tax preparation, tax support space. We have a long history of work there, have many current projects. And so I want to just give you some brief examples of what that looks like. So that is our agenda. All right, next slide. So what is AmeriCorps VISTA? AmeriCorps VISTA is a national service program that strengthens efforts to eliminate and alleviate poverty through volunteering and the mobilization of resources. We really have 4 core principles that guide our work. First and foremost, our work is really focused on fighting poverty and alleviating the effects of poverty. The second is we want to do that in a way that's truly empowering and partnering with communities. The way in which we do that is through building capacity. So unlike other aspects or other programs of AmeriCorps that really focus on direct service, we focus on capacity building. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And then finally, we're really about sustainable solutions. So an ideal VISTA project ultimately builds capacity on the part of an organization, a community, a network that outlasts the VISTAs who are serving and the VISTA project. So those are kind of the cornerstones of what VISTA is. Next slide. So we are a people program. We have about 8,000 people who serve every year, and they do that in partnership with project sponsors. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is this thing called project sponsor. They're basically, the project sponsor is like the host organization. In grant making programs, we'd call them the grantee, but because we are a people program and the primary resource that we provide is people, that we call them sponsors. There are 2 models for sponsorship when it comes to a VISTA project. So next slide. There's a single site model where you basically have a sponsoring organization that then has a supervisor that then supports the VISTA members. That's kind of a classic traditional VISTA model. The sponsoring organization could be a nonprofit, it could be a local government, state government, county government. It could also be public education, higher ed university, or a tribal government. So it's a pretty expansive category of who could be a sponsor. So that's one model, is the single site model. The second model is what we call an intermediary model, which is where you have a larger organization that has more reach, could be national, could be regional, could be statewide, and they basically sub-grant the VISTAs to sub-sites who then have a site supervisor who then support the VISTAs. So both models are welcome and encouraged. Both can be highly effective. But I think as you evaluate opportunities, think about which category you might fit into in terms of being able to use VISTA resources. All right, next slide. So when it comes to what the VISTAs do, that is really at the discretion of the sponsor. So when we say that we are, about partnering and building capacity with communities, it's really the community, the organizations, the sponsors, our partners that drive what it is that looks like. And so for sponsors, that really begins with the first design of the project. And actually, one of the things that makes the VISTA application process unique is the importance of obtaining community input. So the community actually has to participate in the design of a project to ensure that there's that strong connection and tie to the community. Second, there need to be clear performance measures. And then finally, there are some reporting responsibilities, just like you would with any other resource or grant. Next slide. There is an opportunity for folks who are familiar with other AmeriCorps programs. So AmeriCorps VISTA is one of 4 programs at AmeriCorps, the agency, which is a federal agency. And AmeriCorps State and National, which is the largest of the programs, is a direct grant making program, and they have something called Match. Cost sharing is sort of VISTA's equivalent, but in some different ways. So for some of our larger and better resourced sponsors, they basically contribute towards the cost, and in that way we have more people serving. It's not the majority of sponsors that we have. It's less than 20%. And we actually statutorily are not allowed to deny participation in VISTA based on financial reasons. So this is like an added bonus and something that we begin to talk about with sponsors in the later years of their projects, but something that I do want to make sure that people know and are aware of. So that's cost sharing. So, before I get into kind of some examples of AmeriCorps VISTA and our work specifically around tax issues that may be related, I want to just give you a better flavor of AmeriCorps VISTA. So again, as I said before, AmeriCorps VISTA is a national service program that's really anchored at the local community. And it's a people program. So we have 8,000 people serving through these projects. The majority of the people serving give 1 year of full-time service. And in doing so, they get a modest living allowance. They also, if they successfully complete their term of service, they get some resources and benefits in terms of being able to, like an education award that they can put towards other things. So we'll talk a little bit more about members, but I want to just sort of have that in mind in terms of the people who are serving. Okay. But because of the group that's assembled here and your focus on this work, I want to just talk a little bit about VISTA's tradition of working with sponsors around taxes, EITC, and right now the child tax credit, which I know has been top of mind for all of you, like all of us. Next slide. So as I said before, VISTA has a really long history of supporting VITA sites and other organizations that are connected to taxes, tax education, and tax benefits like the Earned Income Tax Credit. And so there's a couple of examples. So during the pandemic, the United Way of King County and AmeriCorps VISTA provided services in 20 languages with the help of more than 300 volunteers to use the online platform getyourrefund.org to help communities members file their taxes. So classic example of capacity building in the sense of being able to broaden and expand who's able to take advantage of these resources. Many projects sort of help to create a continuum of service. And so, they focus on using their credit towards a micro savings or lending program, doing financial education, or a kind of other asset building. Again, what you can see is because of our focus on low-income communities and members of those communities and our desire to build capacity, as you can see with sort of a really strategic use of VISTAs is to either catalyze sort of a new project or effort. So something you have an idea for, but you just don't have the capacity to get it going, or to take something to scale. Those are some common threads that kind of continue all through VISTA projects, kind of regardless of what they're applied for. Now, the work that we do on EITC and the work that we do in partnership with VITA sponsors is only one cross-section of our work. We do a ton of work in food insecurity, housing issues, like I know some of you do too. And so again, because VISTA is a bottom-up organization, we really let the communities determine and the sponsors determine what's the highest and best use of these VISTA members. And what that means is it's hard to explain VISTA, but we work on projects that really do meet the needs and are customized to each and individual community. So those are a couple of examples in terms of our past work on EITC and VITA. Like many of you, we've also been very focused on the child tax credit. And this has really been an agency-wide approach for us. And so there are two partnerships I want to just sort of highlight. We've done some broad-based training of both our sponsors and members on the child tax credit to make sure that everyone's understanding is increased. We're also in a partnership with HUD right now. It's a longtime partner of ours. We have over 200 VISTA members who are serving in HUD partnership sites. Those are promise zones, envision centers, kind of other. There's a tenant-based organizing project. So pre-existing projects that were already underway and happening. And basically what we're doing is in partnership with HUD, the agency, working to make sure that they're incorporating child tax credit education, outreach, and enrollment activities for the non-filer community. And so that's a dedicated partnership. Different program for AmeriCorps, but we've got AmeriCorps Seniors that also is doing a similar partnership with Head Start, which is wonderful in utilizing older adults, so 55 and older working in Head Start centers, again, to identify and support non-filers to file. So, but wait, there's more. Next slide. Because of the importance of the child tax credit, I actually issued some program flexibility that is unusual for VISTA, but felt like it was important in the moment, and to really allow VISTA as a program and our VISTA members to really meet the moment. And so I issued program flexibility to basically say any VISTA who's currently serving, regardless of what their assignment is, can incorporate child tax credit activities without sort of going through the normal paperwork of adjusting the assignment description for the VISTA. So we have over 4,000 VISTAs who are currently serving, and this flexibility allows them for a limited amount of time and just on activities related to the child tax credit to be able to include outreach, education, and in fact, direct enrollment of individuals. So this is a unique thing. We are not a rapid response program, but the reason why I say it is I think to demonstrate just how aligned we are with all of you in terms of the importance of these benefits, but also the incredible work that it takes, to build the trust and to provide the support to be able to help those who are eligible for these benefits, and arguably many who need them the most. So that is our work on the child tax credit. So as I mentioned to you before, in addition to our incredible project sponsors, which are those kind of host organizations that actually provide the support to our VISTAs, the heart of the VISTA program are our members. And we at the end of the day are a people program. That is the value that we have to bring, and they are incredible. So here are a couple basics to give you a better sense of who those members are. Next slide. So AmeriCorps VISTA members, basically, in order to serve, you have to be 18 or older. We have VISTAs who are 18, and we have VISTAs who are in their 80s, which is amazing. You have to be a US citizen or a legal permanent resident. And we're actually the only AmeriCorps program that has that provision in terms of being able to allow permanent residents who are not citizens to serve, which is great. There is a criminal history review check that you go through, and you have to have just some knowledge, skills, abilities that are relevant. We as a national agency recruit, thousands of people to apply and maintain kind of a candidate pool. These people are ultimately on our payroll, but they are selected by the sponsor organization. So you get all the benefit and control of deciding who your VISTAs are, but without the headache of the payroll, if that makes sense. So once a VISTA project is awarded, basically the sponsor organization creates a volunteer assignment description and then begins to get the word out to their own network, but also to our candidate pool. And then they actually interview and select the VISTAs. About 2/3 of the VISTAs who serve are in their 20s. So it is by no means exclusively a young person's program, but it is the majority of people who serve. And just so you kind of have that in mind, but you name it, you can find it in terms of people. Some people relocate for their service term, and we provide a small reallocation stipend. I'm also doing a lot of work to support additional recruitment of people serving their own communities. And we have really both and. And so what's great about that is it may be that you really need a specific skill set like mapping, and it gives you access to a national pool of people who can really bring in those mapping GIS skills. Or maybe you want to think about, further investing in your own community and having a deeper connection. And so, people in your very own community can serve. That's a little bit about kind of who they are. Next slide. So what do they do? As I mentioned before, every VISTA project is different. So we have 8,000 members serving every year. We have over 4,500 projects and over 700 sponsors. And, it really is a rainbow of different opportunities because no two communities are alike. And organizations, governments, have different needs at different points in time, and they can really make VISTA their own. We do find that VISTA members do sort of a core set of activities, regardless of how it's applied. So it may be housing, food insecurity, public health, economic opportunity, you name the kind of the focus. But the types of skills that they tend to build, this is under the capacity building bridge, is they do a lot of networking. So how asset mapping, how to do outreach and better understand, where people are, and sort of how to access them. So a lot of asset mapping, networking, outreach. As I mentioned before, they do a lot of scaling of kind of existing programs. So let's say you've had success in one place and you want to take it to the next level. That sort of preparation, project management, and planning is a perfect kind of VISTA sweet spot. Third, they do a lot of volunteer management, training, and recruitment. We know that so many of you rely on volunteers to do a lot of work. And this is probably our number one activity for VISTAs, is really supporting the ability to have more volunteers. So in California, for instance, the State Service Commission is a first-time VISTA sponsor, and they use their VISTAs to basically revamp their volunteer system for their statewide network of food banks in the face of COVID and, incredible need in terms of the food banks services, but also it was accompanied by a time where they saw a dramatic reduction in their volunteers, the majority of whom are 60 and over. So the VISTAs basically redesigned the volunteer management system, rebuilt kind of a recruitment system, and were able to kind of resurrect that volunteer workforce at a time where it really was needed. And then finally, fundraising. We know that fundraising is essential and really critical and so hard to get to when you're also doing the day-to-day work. And so this is probably the second area of greatest focus for VISTAs. They do grant writing, they do research, things that really bring in more resources to organizations and really set them up again for additional sustainability. So those are some examples of who the members are. So hopefully you're like, okay, I have a general sense of kind of how this works. I have a general sense of who the members are, but how does this work? So we are the government. So we do have a process that I'm going to briefly walk through. We also have many more detailed webinars. If you're interested in pursuing things, we've got a regional office staff who can answer questions at any point in time too. Okay, so the application process for those of you who might be interested. There are two main steps to the application process for VISTA. The first is a concept paper. And this is really to basically be efficient with your time and our regional office staff. So rather than going through the whole step, multi-step process of an application, we want to first just start with a concept paper to see if those core components are there. So it's really kind of a first screen, and it allows our team to determine whether or not there's alignment in terms of core values, a focus on deep poverty, community participation, and if it's focused on capacity building. So that's kind of the preliminary step. The second is once your concept paper is accepted, then you go to the actual project application, which are sort of all basically fleshing out the details that are laid out in the concept paper. Characteristics of a strong concept paper. First and foremost, aligns with AmeriCorps core focus areas and VISTA programming priorities. And I can share you a link. I'll share a link at the end in terms of our annual program priorities. Addresses the needs of low-income communities, involves the community in project development and implementation, leads to organizational capacity and sustainability, generates public or private sector resources. Again, that capacity building piece, promotes local volunteer service, and is as specific as you can be in terms of what your intention is and how this can be catalytic in terms of capacity and resources. So pretty broad, and my guess is applies to a lot of the things that you're talking about, and hopefully is helpful in terms of getting started. Okay, so if you're like, that sounds great, and so I want to know more, we have very detailed concept paper instructions, which can be found on the AmeriCorps.gov website. And again, I'll share some links. These instructions contain a lot of details on how to submit the concept paper and what to include in it. There really are no secrets here. And so I just want to be like as straightforward as possible about kind of what we're really looking for. And it really is the alignment, that core intent of focusing on deep poverty, and capacity building, and really thinking about the member experience. I would say that's probably another thing that I didn't mention before. The beauty of VISTA is sort of a two-sided coin in the sense of the project itself builds capacity and has impact, but also ideally this is a transformative experience on the part of an individual. And so being mindful about that member experience is also really important. Okay, so lots more instructions on the website. We also have regional offices that are assigned geographically, and each state has their own regional office. If you're a national organization, you'd go to the office where your national headquarters is based, even if you provide programming in other states. And you can always reach out to a portfolio manager and have a conversation based on who's assigned to your state if you have more questions. Okay, I'm wrapping up because I really want to get to your questions. So in terms of timeline, we have 4 dates of when concept papers are due. And so you can see sort of how they're broken down. So the next concept paper deadline, our fiscal calendar starts on October 1st. So our first deadline of FY22 is November 3rd. And we'll make decisions about concept paper applications in December, and then your actual project application happens in January. The second concept paper deadline is the end of January, the third is the end of March, and the fourth is the beginning of June. So those just give you a sense. You can always submit your concept paper before then, but those are kind of the deadlines of when we begin that kind of consideration process and actually make the decisions. So hopefully that is helpful. In terms of completing the process, this is after your concept paper is accepted, then you go through and, you figure out the details. Your site supervisor goes through an orientation, which we've been doing virtually during COVID. And then we also work with you around recruitment, kind of create a service listing, and then you begin to vet candidates. So that is the process. As I said before, we have a lot of links, and I'll work with Roxy to make sure that you have access to all of these links. For those of you who are interested, and it may be a now thing, it may be in a future thing, AmeriCorps VISTA was started in 1965. So we've been around for a long time, hope to be around for a while. And if this isn't the right fit for you right now, hopefully it will be in the future. And so want to make sure that it's on your radar. So here are a bunch of resources that you can access, and we'll make sure that you have those. Again, one of the most important things to do is to reach out to your regional office. They're incredible resources for VISTA. It's actually where the award decisions are made. And they're also people who know your state and know your community, and so can have just a much more in-depth conversation than headquarters. And that's really what they're there for. So if you're kind of like, I'm not really sure where to go or where to start with your portfolio manager in your regional office. But enough from me. Rather than have me talk about the process in total generalities, we actually one of our VISTA sponsors is on the line, Catholic Charities, which is a current VISTA project sponsor, and I thought could provide a little bit of just thoughts around or maybe examples around how they use their VISTAs and thoughts on the process. So I'll turn it back to you, Roxy, maybe to connect with the person from Catholic Charities.
Hi, my name is Abby Qualiatine, and I am our manager of AmeriCorps programs here at Catholic Charities USA. A little bit of context about our organization overall before I dive into the VISTA side of it. So at Catholic Charities USA, we are the membership organization for Catholic charities throughout the United States. There are 167 member agencies throughout the United States serving in their local communities. And our main focus is providing supportive services to people in need and have the ultimate similar goal of VISTA of reducing poverty in the United States. So we have had VISTA programs since 2014. And we are a national intermediary of AmeriCorps VISTA, and we operate, our office is in Virginia. So as a national intermediary, we operate out of the Mid-Atlantic region in Philadelphia. The main focus of our VISTA program right now is family strengthening. And so that means that our members are providing a variety of supportive services at our local agencies. For this financial year, we have 46 members, including 2 VISTA leaders who support the kind of grants management and member development side of our AmeriCorps programs. And I think I forgot to mention that I am also an alumni of National Service myself. I served as the AmeriCorps NCCC team leader out of Vicksburg, Mississippi. And then I did a year of as a VISTA leader with Catholic Charities USA before I joined in on this position. So our AmeriCorps VISTA program right now, like I said, is focusing on family strengthening at our local agencies. And just like Meg said, every single one of our projects looks a little different. It's really great because we apply as our national office with a general frame of that family strengthening component. And then each of our local agencies can really cater it to meet the specific needs of their community at that point in time. The main categories that our VISTAs work with are volunteer development and supporting our volunteer services, curriculum development, resource development, and community outreach. We have nothing but amazing things to say about VISTA and are super excited for all of our partnership that we do with them. I also highly recommend reaching out to the regional office. Our portfolio manager is incredible, and we meet about once a week just to check in, and they're really great support throughout the process. I would say it can be a little challenging to start AmeriCorps programs or VISTA programs in recruiting. Meg said that there's a really great pool of applicants, and AmeriCorps does a good job providing support and resources. But any challenges that you might encounter in recruiting a member are all well worth it. The success and the outcomes of all of our VISTA members is really incredible, and it far outweighs any of the challenges that you encounter in the very beginning. So we've had nothing but great experiencing working with AmeriCorps. We also have 4 other state and national programs that we do from a national intermediary perspective. But AmeriCorps VISTA is by far our most popular, and it's really great, and highly encourage you all to apply. It's expanded our potential at the local level and our programs exponentially.
Abby, thank you so much. You should have been doing this presentation instead of me. I didn't know that we had a service alum as well as an expert in AmeriCorps and VISTA. But I so appreciate you sharing your example, because what I find is VISTA is actually really hard to explain. But the reason why it's hard to explain is actually one of its biggest strengths, which is it is so customized and so different. And especially right now, you know, with low-income communities facing just so many interlocking crises, having this additional capacity and support is needed now more than ever. And so being able to really customize it to your needs is incredibly important. Abby also mentioned something that I was completely remiss in mentioning, which is we also do have a a core of VISTA leaders who serve. And those are people who basically have already gone through service. They've either participated in VISTA, previously Peace Corps, or NCCC, which is a residential program through AmeriCorps as well. So basically they have experience with something that's pretty similar, and they basically provide support, connection, and fostering among VISTAs when you have sort of a cohort of VISTAs. Not all projects have VISTA leaders. We have some projects that have one VISTA. But if you have more of a cohort side, what we find is a VISTA leader can be really helpful. Thank you again, Abby, for sharing that. So that was a lot of talking, and I want to make sure I see a bunch of questions in the Q&A, and my guess is that folks have other questions as well, which we welcome. So I turn it back to Roxy.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you so much for this presentation and walkthrough about the AmeriCorps VISTA program and how to become a project sponsor. I will start with the questions that we've received. Please, everyone, if you have more questions, including if you have questions for Abby, please do drop them into the Q&A box. Also, I want to share with everyone that this session is being recorded. We will share the recording and the slides and links that Meg has shared to you within the next week. So to kick us off, the first question, we have other programs that address poverty outside of VITA. Could we have VISTA members support multiple programs?
Yes. So again, we have VISTAs where the project assignment focuses on a program, right? Like VITA centers, right? We have VISTA projects that focus on organizational capacity building. So that may be general volunteer recruitment or fundraising, project management, strategic planning. And then we also have VISTAs who support networks or coalitions. So it really is flexible. And, again, what we find is the individuals and organizations that are often best representative of communities, and specifically low-income communities, often are multifaceted. So we don't restrict our work to a single issue or even a couple of issues. And similarly, many of our sponsors don't either. So even if you're a single site sponsor, you may have that VISTA splitting their time. We've had a lot of VISTAs working on vaccine outreach and education, as well as economic opportunity initiatives because of the pandemic. So you can really design it in a way that works for you. Great question.
Excellent. And a somewhat related question, can one organization host two VISTAs at the same time for the same project that is across a big region?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, we have a lot of VISTAs serving in rural areas as well as urban areas, and often they will be by themselves, or just maybe a small organization, and that's what they ultimately need. But we have other organizations where there are cohorts and people serving together. So it really, is driven by what your needs are and what you can support. As we start to look at those larger cohorts, that's when we want to start to consider a VISTA leader to make sure that there's added support to the site supervisor in terms of, just supporting that member experience and making sure that they're growing, learning through the process as well. But absolutely, each VISTA member does have a volunteer assignment description. And so it does need to be clear and specific, but there can absolutely be redundancy across VISTA members.
Okay, so the next question I'd like to ask, there are two people who have asked a similar question. So one person shares that they applied for AmeriCorps in the past and they were turned down because they are a national organization that hosts 50 sites, but doesn't have a permanent office. And another person also shared that they had issues because they have a virtual office. So being that we've been living in a world where there is increased virtual working, has there been any changes to this provision for the AmeriCorps VISTA program?
Great questions. And full disclaimer, I have been the director of AmeriCorps VISTA since January of this year. So we'll see how well I do with this. The short answer is yes and no, and maybe. So we have basically temporary guidance that was issued at the beginning of the pandemic that allows for VISTA sponsors to be able to support, to have their VISTA members serve virtually, whether that's fully virtually, a combination, or could now be actually in person. Basically, there's flexibility provided in a way that wasn't there before. So we have VISTA projects for the first time having VISTA members actually be in different sites and different states than where they're serving. That doesn't work for all projects, right? There's only certain projects that would support that even in a COVID reality, but is now an option during kind of this temporary guidance that we've issued. And there's some FAQs that really spell this out on our website that continue to be the guiding principle in terms of what is and isn't possible. Those are temporary. And so we are reevaluating within the agency kind of what our long-term answer is here. The nature of work is changing. And while we still want to make sure that it is a quality experience, and we know that not all work requires face-to-face interaction. So I'm very interested in exploring maintaining some of this flexibility around basically teleservice. I think it expands who can serve and who is eligible to serve in various projects, even though it may not work for all projects. I think if we're doing that, we just still want to make sure that that site supervision is hands-on and that there's a meaningful experience for the member in addition to impact being accomplished. Because again, that the charge of VISTA is twofold. So we have temporary flexibility that would be different than what you've experienced in the past. It has not been made permanent policy. Those conversations are underway. So that's the yes, no, maybe answer to that question.
Thank you. A complex issue indeed. So our next question, we have several questions that are very specific about applying and the expectations for VISTAs. One person asked, can we apply to be a sponsor? And if approved, recruit local AmeriCorps VISTA participants? And that would, of course, be following the mentioned requirements.
Absolutely. So we, all sponsors should plan and prepare to recruit in addition to the national recruitment that we do. I would never advise anything other than that. And the selection of who serves is always left to the sponsor. I personally am interested in my time as director and as a political appointee in increasing accessibility to the program. And a big part of that is actually supporting greater pathways for people to serve in their own community. And so that is something that is encouraged, supported, and absolutely something that we love to see happening. So if someone, if having community connection, previous community knowledge, kind of cultural capacity is important for your VISTA project, then absolutely you should focus there. For other VISTA projects, they may be looking for the specific skill set, and they may not be able to find that as readily or as quickly in their own community. Those other requirements are not as critical to them. And so they are fine with, basically someone relocating. I've seen both situations work. Many times you have VISTAs sort of adopt their new community and end up becoming longtime residents, sometimes not. So, again, sort of the classic VISTA answer of it depends, but we highly encourage people to recruit locally and love to see that happening. We have sort of a toolbox of recruitment tools and resources that people can use and customize that hopefully make that easier.
Okay, and can someone see the availability of VISTAs in their area before they go through the application process?
That's a good question. I don't think so, because I think one is it's always changing, and two, basically VISTAs start on a rolling basis. So it's a pretty dynamic candidate pool, and also each VISTA is allowed to apply to up to 10 opportunities. So it's basically ever changing. I think if you're interested in looking at the profile or have specific concerns around being able to meet your recruitment needs, that's absolutely something that I would highly recommend talking with a portfolio manager. Maybe for instance, it's really important to you that you have older VISTAs, right? And sort of people who have a certain skill set and experience that often comes with age, and that's something that's important to you. Those people absolutely exist. We actually have a growing number of kind of career switchers or recent retirees that are using VISTA as a second, third act. But that, if it's something that's maybe more specialized or niche, that's something that you can absolutely talk about with the portfolio manager to make sure that, that pathway is there. But I don't think you could actually review like a resume bank.
Helpful. And as people are considering applying for a VISTA, how many hours a day are VISTAs required to work? Is there any flexibility with that?
Yep. So the majority of VISTAs, so of those 8,000, about 5,000 serve in sort of the traditional VISTA model, which is a year, 12 months of full-time service. And the expectation is that they work 40 hours a week. So it really is full-time. Many VISTAs do have part-time jobs, particularly because the living allowance is modest, and that is possible and permitted. But the expectation is that the service is full-time. There is a small program that we run for anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people a year in the summer. It is only in the summer. And it's our summer associate program. And that is when you have individuals serve for 8, 9, or 10 weeks. It is still full-time for those weeks, but it's an abbreviated version. Summer associates is something that existing sponsors can pursue. So it's not something that new sponsors begin with, but rather once you're kind of going, you can basically layer on some additional oomph in the summertime through summer associates. But it is full-time, 12 months for the standard VISTA.
Okay. Have you seen any changes in the number of VISTA members because of low unemployment rates?
Absolutely. Great question. So there's an inverse relationship between recruitment, I would say for all AmeriCorps programs and sort of the strength of the economy. We saw record recruitment and retention rates during COVID. Similarly, kind of right after the Great Recession, a lot of people choosing to serve. We were a place for Peace Corps volunteers to serve when they were evacuated from their countries. And, because a lot of people were facing unemployment. So we had a really strong surge and very high numbers. That's definitely come down. As we all know, there's a really competitive labor market. And we actually have more spots because of funds from the American Rescue Plan. So I'm investing quite a bit more at the national level in recruitment. There's a lot more that we could be doing and hope that the recent increase in the living allowance will make it more attractive. It's also why I'm talking to great organizations like all of you, is because I find in working, that so many people are looking to serve right now. They may just not know about it and they may not know about the opportunity. And so that's part of the work that I'm doing in my role as director, is to expand our network. But yes, unfortunately, we have seen a decline and I'm doing everything I can to change that fact.
Okay. So the next question, I believe I'm interpreting this correctly. How can community-based organizations structure their application to become a VISTA project sponsor if they have a pending nonprofit status?
That is a really good question, and one where I would defer to our portfolio manager for their expertise. In that case, what I would think about is probably, going through an intermediary model. So you're basically working under the umbrella of someone else's, 501c3 status and capacity. Because to my knowledge, and I could be incorrect, you do need to have that status or be local, state, or county government. So I'm not familiar with an opportunity of someone where it's pending, but that would be an opportunity to think about linking up with someone else and having a multi-site project.
Great, okay. So you mentioned that some VISTAs have part-time jobs, that is permitted. Can sponsors supplement a VISTA's pay as well?
They can supplement. So the VISTA living allowance is, we basically have a minimum living allowance of $15,000 a year. And then that's adjusted for cost of living in terms of where you serve. So there's basically different pay rates. We also have reallocation funds for those who do relocate. We have health benefits, childcare benefits, things like that. What we have is we definitely see sponsors supplementing, particularly related to housing. So they'll give them a housing supplement, as part of their project. It has to be extended to all VISTAs. It can't be extended to some, and those details can get worked out. So that's sort of the best example, and one that I see pretty readily.
Okay. Now, could you discuss the match requirement more? For example, if you have one VISTA, what would be the match requirement?
Yeah. So I don't want to use the word match because it's not a match and it's not a requirement. This is different than, for those of you who are familiar with other AmeriCorps programs, like AmeriCorps State and National, kind of the big grant making, or AmeriCorps Seniors, where there is a match requirement. With AmeriCorps VISTA, there is a cost sharing option. So basically what you do is you pay for kind of the expenses associated with the member. And that basically allows more people to serve, right? We maximize our dollars. It is not a requirement. It is something that is encouraged where it makes sense, but is absolutely not a requirement. And right now we have about 13% of our portfolio who participates. And again, it's basically people who have those resources and want to use them to increase the number of people who are serving. So we, by statute, cannot require it, have no plans to require it. We can't turn away someone based on their ability to participate in cost share. And in fact, the vast majority of the portfolio does not participate in cost share.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So cost sharing is not required. For those that do participate, do you find any trends with people participating after a certain number of years?
It's definitely something that is explored, kind of in the later years of a project. But again, it's not a requirement. It's more about thinking about sustainability and sort of the transition. On average, I think I mentioned this before, VISTA projects are between 3 and 7 years long. And, ideally there's sort of a transition after year 7, maybe year 8, where folks are bringing it in-house. So it is something that's explored in later years of a VISTA project, but again, not a requirement, and not the basis of a decision in terms of whether or not VISTAs are awarded.
Okay. Do you have more applications than you have candidates? Yes.
So right now we average about 3 applicants for every placed member. Now that is on average. So, just as Abby said, if We definitely have some projects that struggle with recruitment, and that may be because of where they are. It may be because of their requirements. It may be, sometimes we see challenges because there's just a lack of housing or a lack of affordable housing. So, we definitely have situations where we need to provide more support on the recruitment side. And in fact, that's something, as I mentioned before, I'm investing more in recruitment. And part of it is I want to kind of create almost like a rapid response team for projects that are struggling with recruitment, to basically kind of give them a boost in terms of additional recruitment, as well as like the more national stuff that we're doing, digital ads, blogs, conferences, webinars, things like that. So we do have more, but recruitment always takes work, and depending on the requirements and what people are looking for, the type of project and where they're located, it may be harder for someone to find what they're looking for, and may take some more time.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions before we close out. Thank you again, everyone, for your wonderful questions. As a sponsor, do we have to have a certain amount of donation dollars that are non-government?
Not to my knowledge. I think you need to demonstrate that you are that you have solid sort of financial footing, that, you're going to be sustained as an organization through the project, and have the infrastructure to be able to support and host a VISTA. But to my knowledge, there's not additional funding requirements.
Okay, and our final question. Are sponsors required to show an evidence base for the effectiveness of their programs? This is kind of a 2-parter. And for programs that are starting something new, rather than building upon something that they've been doing already, what kind of evidence or documentation do you require to demonstrate that this is a worthwhile initiative?
Well, that's a great question. Way to save a big one to the end. The answer is twofold. So as part of the project design process, sponsors actually determine their own performance measures. So they kind of set those in a way that correspond with their project. It is a requirement of getting an award of VISTAs, but it is customized. In addition to that, we also do a program supplemental survey where we ask kind of a standard set of questions across the whole portfolio around volunteers recruited, dollars raised, sort of things like that. So again, because projects are so different, what we find is there does need to be customization. So performance measures are required. They are determined by the project and as part of the project application process. And then we do this supplement where we ask these standard questions that basically inform us as to what our VISTAs are doing. I saw one question, Roxy, around sort of the direct support. So again, this is where the difference between direct service and capacity building comes in. So the question was, could you have a VISTA be a greeter and, kind of have different roles at the VITA Center? VISTAs have to focus on capacity building, so they can't do that direct service. So they couldn't be a greeter, but they could recruit and train volunteers who are greeters. So that's kind of a good example of where the distinction is. And where, if you're looking for kind of those direct support, maybe there's another AmeriCorps program that's a better fit that is more focused on direct service, whereas we're very focused on the capacity building.
Fantastic. Well, Meg, thank you again so much for joining us, for sharing this information and this opportunity. I can tell from the questions in the chat and the comments as well, this has been very helpful. As a reminder, we will share the recording, slides, and links with all of you. I know some of you have mentioned that you want to share this with others in your organization and other partners so you can start strategizing. So we encourage that and we support that. Thank you again for tuning in and have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.